Hello, Revere, and welcome to another show. Today we have another special guest. He's running for school committee, and he was formerly on the council for several years. Mr. Steve Reardon, welcome.
Morris, nice to see you.
My pleasure, sir. It's an honor and a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
People don't know, but you are a country lawyer.
Yes, I am a country lawyer. Well,
Right, I'm not going to ask you what country, but you are a country lawyer.
No, it's this country, actually.
Okay, thank you. Before we start, Steve, could you tell us a little about yourself and your general background, please?
Sure, I've been a citizen and a happy citizen and proud citizen of Revere my entire life, with some exceptions, like when I went to college.
Did you graduate from the Revere schools?
I actually graduated from BC High, but
BC.
I went to Immaculate for 8 years before I went there.
Boston College, great team, great football team.
No, high school.
Oh,
The high school. We
still
did have
great.
and we did have a great football team.
Right.
My wife, Daryl, and I live on Winthrop Avenue. We just moved there last December, actually. I have a daughter, Ellen. She's a teacher, actually, in the Medford school system.
Oh.
She's doing very well there. As I said, I went to Immaculate for 8 years, then I went on to BC High, and I graduated from UMass in 1974 in Amherst. And then I started in the family business, Reardon's Restaurant, you may know it as. It was known as many different things in years past. Fenno's Cafe, Maffei's, it was known before my family bought it. And I ran the restaurant until about 91 rather, when I went to law school. I graduated from law school in 1995, and I was admitted to the bar later that year, and I've been practicing ever since.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
Former police chief Reardon.
He's my brother.
Oh, he's your brother?
He is my brother, yes.
Very good.
Yep, and
A very nice gentleman and a very good police chief.
he was a great police chief.
Yep.
And he's close to retirement now. He's still a police captain. In fact, he's the executive officer now in the police department. Chief Guido's executive officer.
Right.
I started law practice with Phil Boncory, Senator Joe Boncory's dad.
Yep.
And Joe was at St. John's Prep while I was with Phil back in the day.
So you said 1974, am I correct?
Yes, I graduated college in '74.
So you're a senior citizen now.
Well, yeah, I guess I am.
Oh, good. So you'll come down to Alessandra for a cup of coffee sometimes and join us?
Well, I have a rather thriving law practice, so I'm pretty busy. But I certainly will come down and see you.
We'd love to see the seniors, and we got a director. I don't know if you met him.
Sure, Steve. I know Steve very well. Yeah, he's
Nice
a great
gentleman.
guy. Great guy.
Okie dokie. Now, you said you were a country lawyer, but
Yeah.
I mean, what kind of law do you actually practice? I mean, mostly.
Well, when I say country lawyer, I think that's a term that came with to people who lived in the country needed a lawyer that did a lot of different things. You go into the far reaches of the further out than the suburbs. And back in the day, if you needed to have a real estate lawyer, someone had to do that, but you couldn't go driving around trying to find a real estate lawyer,
Right.
or they wouldn't drive to you. So lawyers like myself developed versatile practices. We work on far-ranging things. I do a lot of criminal defense work. I do a lot of real estate. I do a lot of automotive accidents and slip and fall accidents, that sort of thing. But anything that intrigues me, I latch onto occasionally. And some unusual things sometimes come forward.
Excuse me, today I see on TV, when I was a young man, Steve, we never saw lawyers advertise on radio or TV. And then, I don't know how many years ago, when I saw the first one, I always wondered why. They don't have to advertise, but they do.
Well, I'll tell you, that used to be very much frowned upon by the bar associations,
Yep.
and it was at one point considered an ethical breach for lawyers to advertise. But as you know, ideas about commerce and communication expanded, I think what happened, a lot of people realized that in order to get an effective legal representation, sometimes you had to have a choice, and one of the ways you get a choice is that people advertise. And so now pretty much everybody has some form of advertising. I advertise in the church bulletin, so at Immaculate. So other than that, I really don't do a lot. But
I have to. Can I tell you a true story about something that you wouldn't believe unless you read it on Google?
I see a lot of things, so try me.
Okay, I was at Brockton VA.
Uh-huh.
There with me was a gentleman, 105 years, celebrated his 105th year birthday in February this year.
Good
We
for him.
called him Judge Layton, Leighton. You can look it up on the computer.
I know who he is.
Then you know the story about him from Cape Verde? Are we talking about the same judge?
I think so, yeah.
Who never went to high school and public school?
Yeah,
And graduated from Harvard?
yeah.
Did you hear what happened with that? Well,
Tell me.
okay. No, it's fantastic.
I've heard of him.
Well, that's the one I'm talking about. Never went to public school, never went to high school, so he wrote a letter to Harvard. He'd like to go to Harvard University. They told him he can't accept him because he has no education. But he kept pestering him, day in, 20 phone calls a day, 30 phone calls a day. Finally, one of the professors says, let him take the exam. He's going to flunk, and then we'll be rid of him. There was one problem. He didn't flunk. He came in first without the education. Went through Harvard, graduated with high honors, went back to Illinois, became the head of the Supreme Court in the state of Illinois. That's the one I'm talking about.
That's quite interesting. But I tell you something that points out the mere fact, and I'm glad you mentioned it, that without an education, you really are starting in a very difficult position in this world today.
Yep.
And that's one of the reasons I'm running for a school committee, because education is probably the most important service that we give our citizens is a strong school system.
That's one of the things one of my teachers told me when I was a young kid, that you come into school to get an education is free, but it's the most important thing you'll carry with you in your life.
Certainly.
And that was true.
That and your manners.
Yep, that's good. So if you ever get a chance, look him up, that story.
Yeah, I did. I saw something in the paper or something.
Oh, did you?
I'm sure.
Yep, it was on TV and everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. I hope these questions aren't tough for you. If they are, just bypass them.
No, that's all right. You're always good to me.
I'm good to everybody. I can't play favorites out here, They'll crucify me. You've been here in Revere a long time, your whole life, I know. I spelled I know wrong, but that's all right. You have quite a few family members still in the city?
I do. My brother, as you mentioned, is the former police chief, and he's still here. And my brother Pat is a former city councilor. He was in business here at the restaurant before the restaurant closed. He's now, he lives in Revere still, and he's a teacher in Gloucester. My sister teaches in the school system here. And of course, everybody knows my Uncle Ronnie Corbett, who is probably one of the longest practicing attorneys in the entire Commonwealth. And he's been a great inspiration to me, and he still lives in Revere as well.
Before I continue, since you practice law without mentioning names, without mentioning anybody, what are some of the toughest cases? You do the criminal law too, right?
Yeah.
If a criminal comes to you, and I know you have to defend him, but you know in your heart that he did what he did, isn't that pretty tough?
Well, certain cases are difficult. But
can you refuse a case, if I may ask?
I could. Yes, I could. I don't generally do it because it's very important that people understand that the Sixth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States requires that any defendant have competent legal representation. So the end result is, if that person could not find a lawyer to represent him, he could not be convicted. It's as simple as that. We have a constitution that says you have a right to a lawyer, a competent lawyer.
What's that keep me from saying, I don't want this lawyer, I don't want that lawyer, I don't want that lawyer?
Well, there are restrictions on it. You can't necessarily, it's not so much a question of whether the client wants the lawyer or doesn't want the lawyer. When it gets to the ridiculous, the court steps in and says you have to take him or you have to represent yourself. But in most cases, in almost all cases, a competent attorney is found to represent them. And, there are people with mental health issues that somehow can't grasp that, but those are, part and parcel of what we as attorneys have to deal with. And it's an ethical issue. But for me, I have a duty to my client.
I always wondered, if a person commits a premeditated murder, how could he in the world, you got to be pretty smart to try to commit a premeditated murder. To hide your,
Well,
the things.
I would say people do things sometimes. They may be thinking they thought it out, but they let other things interfere with their thought process. And so oftentimes what they think they might get away with, they don't get away with. I'll give you an example. You see it all the time. Crimes are committed today in front of cameras.
Right, I was
We
going to
have
get to that now.
cameras everywhere, and they're going to become more and more prolific. And while there's a privacy issue there, at least in public places, I really don't see an issue with cameras, security cameras being available. And I honestly believe that arming the police officers with cameras would go a long way to solving some of our criminal issues,
definitely.
especially the way cases sometimes linger in court.
Like the one that happened down in Baltimore. That was one of the cases.
Yeah,
there.
well, there's a lot of that stuff going on. You can see it now, and I
Yep.
think once people recognize the impact that the visual has, they will see a decrease in crime.
Right. Now, you were on the council for several years.
Yes.
What made you decide to run for school committee? And I do have two questions on that after you're done.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you, as I said to you, I think that providing an education to our children is among, if not the most important service that a community provides. It's certainly right up there. And I did spend some time on the school building committee for the Hill School, which was very enlightening to me. I learned a lot while I was there, and I felt and I'm still on the building committee, we haven't finished our work yet, and we can talk about that a little bit later, but I realized that that it's a very complicated matter, very complicated running a school system. Now, you have to remember that the school department budget takes up about half of our budget in the city. And we can't determine what we have to pay for a school system. That, with education reform, has been taken over by the state. They tell us what we need to spend, but it's critical to determine how we spend it. And I think that's an issue that will always be going forward, will be something that's very important and needs a certain set of skills, which I believe I possess through my education and experience as a businessman and my experience as a city councilor, as you suggested. I think I can provide that kind of those kind of skills towards dealing with issues. Remember, this is a lot of money we're talking about.
Right. I think it's about 13 or 14,000 per student per year.
Approximately that, 13,000 it costs. The state reimburses us about half of what it costs. But you're correct. Every student still it costs $6,500, $7,000 out of the pockets of the citizens of Revere to educate each of these students.
That's a lot of money.
It
and
is.
How many offhand? And how many students are in the city of Revere?
I don't have an approximate idea, but I would say it's about 4,500 or so.
That's still quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, and they're growing every day. My understanding is that we are increasing our student rolls by 100 to 200 children each and every year. And this is going to be a critical issue going forward. We've just built 5 new schools, and we're very close to the maximum capacity of those 5 schools as it is.
And they're talking about a new high school too.
New high school is another issue that I think I hope that I can have some influence over and offer some guidance on how we are to go about doing that, because it's certainly on the horizon.
Here's a good question on a high. Where would you put the new high school, people ask?
And it's a good question. And I think that it has to be something that we all come to an agreement on, that we all the citizens and all the school committee people and city council and all the government officials have to sit down and come up with the best solution. Because, as you kind of suggested, there's not a lot of places to put new schools, especially Central High School.
Right.
in the city. So I think we're pretty well confined to where it is now, and working with that piece of property down there, I think is, to me, right now is the only solution. But of course, my ears are open.
Would I be correct in saying before you built the new high school, you cannot tear down the old one. You have to build a new one so you could take the kids right out from the old one and let them go to the new one without them missing any amount of time?
That is undoubtedly the case. The high school has to remain active and operating.
So it can't
while
be
the new
built
high
on the
school is
same
built.
place where the old one is.
Well, it can't be built on the same footprint of the high school, but the property is a large property. We've been fortunate in that, and I was involved with the rebuilding of Della Russo Stadium. We're fortunate that we have a facility such as Della Russo Stadium, which can make up for any deficiencies in athletic fields,
Right.
that we might experience while we're building a new high school, because it seems to me, at least, that that property, the only way to really build a high school is to forego the use of the fields for some period of time while the high school is being built, and then hopefully replace the fields in a different configuration.
Okie dokie. Next. What more? I don't, sometimes I do write the stupidest thing, but I'll do it anyway. I won't give us an update, but it's already built on the Hill School project. So before the Hill School project was finished, what was the update like for you?
Well, it's been an ongoing project for the
It's
last
done now, right?
4
The
years.
Hill is done.
Is it built? Yes, it's been built. We're going into our 3rd year of occupancy, as a matter of fact,
Right.
in this whole school, Hill School. But the building itself was our challenge. It was a challenge for several reasons. First of all, the site was not the most ideal place to put a school. It was a smallish site. So a great deal of planning and architectural innovation had to be done to get a school of the size and capacity of the Hill School on that property. Secondly, we were dealing with 2 separate pieces of property being built out at the same time, the other being the Della Russo Stadium.
Oh, I
So
see.
it was a very, very complicated issue of trying to make both of those pieces of architecture, both of those pieces of property and building coalesce. We also had a contractor, which was the first time that we dealt with them in Revere. We had
You did a good job
previously
on this.
had-
It's a good-looking school.
Well, no question about it, but it wasn't without a lot of tension and difficulty. We opened the school while it was still partially under construction, so it was behind schedule. There were a lot of reasons for that, and once we opened it, there was some issues, and frankly, there are some ongoing issues, although we are very near to resolving them all. This will be our 3rd heating season. There were some issues originally with the heating season. We are ongoing. I talk all the time to Carl Svensson, who is the facilities manager, and he tells me that we're gradually resolving issues. It's a very modern system. It's a very technologically complicated system. Lights go on and heat comes on automatically, depending on who is in the building, et cetera, et cetera. So it's been a challenge, but it's a beautiful school. It's a great school, and it fits very nicely in the piece of property. And I think I'm so happy for the people in Ward 4 who waited so long to be the last school, but the best school that was built in our series of school buildings, 5 school buildings.
So I was going to ask you overall, how do you think the Hill School project turned out? So it didn't turn out too bad, except for those little kinks.
No, it turned out great, and I think those little kinks would have been there no matter what, given the challenges of the architecture of fitting that school into that property. I think it came out fabulous, and everybody I talk to tells me how great it is, especially the parents and the children who get to use it.
When I was a young man, I used to be a structural steel detailer. and I would work with architects because they would do the plans, you know, the building, and the structural engineer and the
Sure.
structural detailer would do the construction
Sure.
to support it. So I remember one of the great architects in Boston, maybe you might have heard of them, Fay Spofford and Thorndike
Sure.
was one of them. Bullfinch was another one.
Yes.
Shepley Bullfinch.
Sure.
Yeah, I remember that.
An old name in architecture.
Right. And they were great. They were up on Mass Avenue, by the way.
Sure.
Okay. Here's something I like to ask people, because they can never know what to say. What about the future?
Well, I think the future is very well. First of all, you can't look at the future out without looking at the past.
Right.
And I will say that during Dr. Dakin's tenure as the superintendent, and you know, all praise to him. He did a great job building 5 schools. He did a great job elevating the school to its present high rate of efficiency, high rate of education, and at the top of urban schools in the district. But we have to continue to build on that. I'm looking forward to joining the school committee and joining the people on the school committee, such as Dr. Carol Ty and the other members who were, you know, at least certainly responsible for that as well, by supporting the superintendent, giving him advice, steering him in the right direction when he needed it, and responding to his leadership. And I want to do that. I'd like to do that. I know we have a new superintendent, and I think Dr. Kelly deserves the kind of support that Dr. Dakin got from the school committee, and I want to be able to help her and help the citizens of Revere. You got to understand something, that when you're talking about the expenditure of the kind of money that we have to pay for schools, I think the citizens deserve a high level of competence in the people they elect to run the show, and I'm looking forward to that.
I heard figures on the new school, and that's what I heard, anywhere from 180 million to 300 million. That's quite a spread.
Well, I think 300 is high. I think 190
low.
is not too low.
No, it's not too low?
But it's probably going to be somewhere in the 190 to 225 million. But, you know, Morris, as you know, today we're talking about that. If we don't build it for another 3 or 4 years,
it's going to be more.
It's going to be more. The good news is, although we gave up a lot of control over the budgeting of schools with ed reform, along with it came the assistance from the state, the great assistance of the state that have allowed us to build 5 new schools, and hopefully will allow us to build a new high school at a reasonable cost.
Mr. Reardon, I'd like to say one thing. I had Mr. Dakin, Paul Dakin, on the show once, and it was an honor to have him because he was voted the #1 superintendent at one time out of all 50 in the United States as one of the best superintendents in the country. And he had the best school in the country. And we're only a little town with 50,000 people, so to be put on the map was really good.
Well, not only that, we're a little town, but we're a little town with a lot of challenges. We have obviously we're an urban district, and we welcome diversity. And diversity is what built this country, what made this country great.
Exactly.
You and I are from all different backgrounds, but we help, and our grandparents and our parents helped build this country, even though they weren't born here or they weren't from the same place. So diversity is a key benefit for us, but it does bring challenges. And so you're right, Dr. Dakin did a great job, particularly when considering those challenges.
Okay, I did ask you, what are your potentials for building a new high school? Do you see any major problems coming forth with the building of the new high school?
Well, obviously,
that could hinder the building.
Yeah, obviously, so you hit on 2 of them: cost and site selection. Those are the 2 biggest issues. And of course, there is another issue with the expanding enrollment. Are we going to need yet another middle school? We don't know those things, but one of the challenges I see for the school committee going forward is to make sure that the people who are populating our schools are actually living in the city. And I know that right now the school department has a section to make sure that children aren't being carried in from out of town just to use our schools. And it's a great compliment to our school system, but we're, in that sense, we're a victim of our own success. But at the same time, we have to make sure that as you suggested, $65,000, $7,000 a child, we're not educating Lynn's children or Chelsea's children
right.
or East Boston's children.
Here's one quick question for you. Do they have, I don't know, nice school in the city of Revere for people that come from, like, foreigners that want to come to learn English, learn school, get an education, but can't do it in the daytime because they work?
Well, that would be something I'd be greatly in favor of. How we
do we have it though?
We don't have it presently.
Oh, we don't.
But
okay.
To my knowledge, but I certainly to put schools to that kind of a use after hours
right.
Would be a great feather in our cap. And I'm not certain that we could necessarily afford it out of the school budget, but I am very much in favor of going after grants for things like that.
Right.
And we need to concentrate our efforts to get as much money into the system that we don't have to provide. And there are many, many grants offered by government agencies and even private businesses, and we have to continue. And I know the school department does that now, and we have to continue to do that.
Okay, we got about a minute and a half left, so you take a minute and 20 seconds and wrap it up, Steve.
Well, I just want to say that I really am looking forward to running for school committee and being on the school committee. I think my education, my experience, my knowledge of the law will all be great assets to the school committee as we go forward with addressing the challenges that we've discussed, you and I have just discussed here, which are probably only the tip of the iceberg.
I know that.
I'm looking forward to it, and I'm looking forward to the challenge, and I'm intrigued by the idea of making our schools the best schools we can have for our children and we can have for our citizens as well.
Right, and I want to say thank you for taking the time off, because I know you are busy. And I want to say thank you, Steve. God bless you and good luck to you.
Morris, anytime. Thank you very much. I'll see you
sir.
around town, and I'll be up for coffee.
I'm looking forward, and I'll play your favorite song at the Senior Center.
That sounds good.
Okay. So let me say thank you. God bless you for coming again, Steve, and good luck to you. God bless the people of Revere. God bless our military, wherever they are, and those that are retired. But most of all, God bless our great country, the United States of America. Thank you all for listening till the next time, and I hope we see each other again. Thank you.